All right, thank you for joining us for tonight's meeting of Council, 23rd of April 2025. Nalakadich wajak mort, kain kadak nijawalilap budja, wejanang wajak kadachin, we're knitting bula yeye. We acknowledge the Whadjuk people as the traditional owners of the Greater Fremantle Walilup area, and we recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. The meeting is being recorded and streamed live online. While all care is taken to maintain privacy, visitors in the public gallery and members of the public submitting a question may be captured in the recording. Attendance apologies and leaves of absence. We've got an apology from Councillor Lorva. Everyone else appears to be here. And we have an application for a leave of absence from Councillor Graham from Friday 16th of May to Friday 23rd of May inclusive. So moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Any other applications for leaves of absence? Do we have any disclosures of interest in relation to tonight's agenda? No. There are no responses to previous public questions taken on notice. We have 2 people here for public question time. I believe you do know the drill, but it's a 3-minute statement or questions, which we will endeavour to answer on the spot when you are finished. And I'll ask you to come up to the microphone to make your statement. And so the first person is Ian Kerr.
Is this on? Yes? Oh. Thank you, Mayor. I've submitted some questions on the South Beach toilets and change rooms, but before I come to those, I would like to talk briefly about the item on the urban forest and tree canopy. The agenda report refers to a target of 600 street and reserve trees for the 2025 programme and a return to the urban forest plan 80% in street and reserve trees target of 1261 street and reserve trees for the 2026 planting programme. Now, whilst such targets are very welcome, particularly any increase in those targets, recent experience with tree plantings along South Terrace highlights the need for street tree plantings to be better designed and maintained. If we look at the southern part of South Terrace, 2 of 14 plantings from last year have died or been removed. 1 is definitely on its last legs. 1 planting space, the one outside La Vespa, never had a tree planted in it, and 5 others show damage to stakes or to the trees themselves that indicates collision damage from parking vehicles, possibly exacerbated by the reduction of the lengths of some parking bays. Some of the planting areas have had bollards replaced by wheel stops, but some have neither bollards nor wheel stops, so nothing to address the collision damage issue. If we are to get the best value out of such programs, we need to improve their implementation and management. My questions on the South Beach toilet and change rooms are as follows. Firstly, how has the City of Fremantle been monitoring the project as it progresses, both before and after the need to remove and replace the concrete slab because it was not laid according to specification? Secondly, are reports that part of the floor had to be removed a second time because the wrong concrete was used correct? Thirdly, if so, is the replacement concrete as poured fit for purpose? Will the contractor be meeting the rectification costs? What impact will there be on the costs to the City of Fremantle and completion dates? And how will City of Fremantle ensure that further mistakes do not occur? Fourthly, is the City of Fremantle confident that the replacement of the slab now complies with the requirements of the original specification for both the concrete works and the steel roof support poles? Fifthly, does the repoured slab include necessary drainage, not only for toilets, washing and shower facilities, but also floor drainage for hosing down to keep the facilities clean and hygienic? And lastly, what warranties apply to the construction and how have these been affected by the problems with the slab? Thank you.
All right, I'll go to the Director of Infrastructure for comments both on the tree planting survival rate and South Beach toilets, change rooms. Thank you.
Thank you, through the Chair. Thank you for your comments on the tree planting. We do constantly strive to improve our tree retention and juvenile tree care. I'll take your comments on board and feed them back through the team, so thank you for that. In respect to South Beach, I'll go through your questions. Question one was about how we monitor progress and what we've done before and after the concrete slab repour. City officers visit site regularly and monitor progress in line with the contractor's regular report. There has been no significant change in our approach in respect to before and after the concrete slab repour. With the repour, I think as I responded before, we had a proposed methodology for the removal and the repour of the slab. This was reviewed and approved by the structural engineers and the architectural consultants that the city engaged. In terms of the pour itself, engineering inspections were conducted prior to the slab removal, then again pre-repour and post-repour to ensure compliance with the approved methodology. In question two, you reference part of the floor being removed for a second time. Yes, on the day of the internal repour, the contractor identified that the wrong specification of aggregate was included in the subcontractor's mix. This was discovered at daybreak during the initial pour inspection by the contractor, and the uncured concrete was removed immediately. This was a subcontractor error, and the contractor would not accept the delivery of the concrete as specified. The batch was replaced, and there's been no compromises on quality. Is the replacement concrete as poured fit for purpose? Yes, the new slab has been installed as per our specification. Will the contractor be meeting the rectification costs? Yes, the subcontractor will be responsible for this. What impact will there be on the cost to the city and the completion date? There's no cost impact for the city. There was a 1-day delay for the contractor in respect to this repour event. How do the City of Fremantle ensure that no further mistakes do occur? Well, basically, we'll keep doing what we're doing. We were able to rectify and address the issue because the contractor knows the standards that we're working to and is committed to the project, and we'll continue to actively monitor progress. Is the city confident that the replacement of the floor slab now complies? Yes, it complies and it's certified. Does the repoured slab include necessary drainage, etc.? Yes, it's been installed as per the specification. And finally, what warranties apply and have these been affected by the problems with the slab? There are a number of mechanisms. The first one will be the general conditions of contract. We typically include a defects liability period for 12 months following practical completion. We hold a bank guarantee from the contractor as well, typically at 5%, so we'll release 2.5% on practical completion and the final 2.5% at final completion, subject to a 12-month post-inspection. There's the Building Act, which guarantees against faulty or defective work for 6 years. And then within the build, we have manufacturer's warranties, and these are provided by the contractor at handover to the city. No warranties have been affected by any of the problems with the slab. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next question is from Gavin McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I have a question in regards to the expressions of interest that were offered to facilitate a paddle tennis facility as one of the options at the Fremantle Park Club Sports and Community Centre. I just have questions in regards to the transparency of that process. And forgive me if some of this information's already been made available. I'd be delighted to be enlightened as to what information is available. My questions are, who was involved in the selection process and deciding the successful shortlisted applicants? Are there minutes of that meeting? Is there an agenda available in deciding those successful applicants? Did the selection panel have prior meetings with any of the applicants, and was that declared as part of that selection meeting? Did or do any of the panel have a personal or business relationship with any of the successful applicants? Did the selection panel follow selection criteria and or have a rubric that can be made publicly available of advertised selection criteria when shortlisting applicants? Did the shortlisted entities meet all the selection criteria? Did other applicants not shortlisted also meet all the advertised selection criteria? Is the council aware that one of its selection criteria required applicants to demonstrate prior experience in operating a similar sporting facility, namely paddle tennis? And that, to my knowledge, the two successful applications or shortlisted applicants had no prior experience operating a facility, and I'm happy to be corrected on that note if that's not the case. Is the council aware that the two shortlisted entities both have a person in common as a principal applicant? And can the council explain why other applicants with experience were not shortlisted? And the last term you have in front of you is really, I hope all this information can be made available, or at least the majority of it, so that we have an open and transparent process. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. All right, I'll go to the Director, Creative Arts and Community for that one. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. Through the Chair, the assessment process resulting from the public EOI is still underway and ongoing, so no decision has been made regards as a successful applicant. All the applicants have been kept up to date regards the process, as have Fremantle Park and City Management. Applicants that were not shortlisted to move to the next stage all received communication from the City explaining how they were assessed against the assessment criteria, and we expect the process to conclude over coming weeks.
All right, thank you. All right, we can't go back and forth. It's just, yeah, we will, if you like, provide some responses to your questions in writing in the minutes of the next meeting. If that is how we can do it, but we can't go back and forth. All right, petitions. I haven't heard anything about any petitions, so I will assume there are none. There are no deputations or presentations that I'm aware of. Can I have someone to move that we confirm the minutes of the last meeting of council? Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Graham. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Is there any elected member communication? No? Okay, let's go into our items. I think unless there's any objections, we'll just stick with the order of the agenda. So the first item was in regard to investigation of a cafe or shop uses in Sampson. Do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation that is on the screen? Was this the original, or did we get an alternate officer's? Okay, yep. Councillor Mofflin, seconded by Councillor Archibald. Councillors. Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, yes. I did raise in our briefing session, I guess, my concern that it felt like the report was sort of kind of drawing a line under the concern and not necessarily progressing what other opportunities might exist. And I felt that would be an unfortunate way to leave the conversation. It is a conversation. It would be almost impossible for any of us to imagine particular resolutions that would be implemented anytime soon, even within the next decade. But Sampson is one of those areas that I think has sort of unfortunately developed in a period of time when there was virtually no local facilities provided as part of that subdivision, and it really feels like it's left out of the opportunities that other suburbs clearly have had. You know, Coolbellup has a little local centre that's sort of come and gone a little bit. Willagee has a little local centre that, you know, again has come and gone a little bit, but is thriving now. They're very similar types of developments, similar sort of eras, and similar sorts of net overall population areas. And so I asked the staff to draft a part 4 for this, and I would like to move a part 4 that way. So if that can be put up on the screen. So it's a minor amendment. It really is just trying to avoid us kicking it down the road. So hopefully someone was happy to second that.
Happy to second that? Yep.
I think it's self-explanatory. It really is just trying to avoid it sounding like we're drawing a line under the possibilities, when in fact I think the strategic planning staff can start to look at very long-term planning, and particularly in conjunction with the City of Melville, given that Samson is one of those sort of rare places that is in 2 local government authorities effectively in terms of the way you feel in the suburb. The point is not that there might be a cafe. The point is not that there should be shops, you know, on Macomb Avenue. The point is not that there should be higher density. The point is not any of those things necessarily. They're all part of conversations. But there are so many things that could be done, such as improving the walkability from Samson through the Coolbellup shops, or improving the walkability to Cardinia. At the moment, you have to cross South Street and South Street and Northlake Road, which, as I mentioned the other night, feels like you're trying to cross the main runway at Perth Airport. Or it could be something that's maybe on the other side of South Street, in our own local government area, with maybe improvements in terms of the way in which you get across the road to those sort of facilities. So there are so many options that should be considered as part of long-term strategic planning, and I guess that is what this recommendation is, just highlighting that we would continue to do that. I just didn't want to leave the people of Samson feeling like it's all too hard and we don't care, because I don't think that is the position of this council. I think we have a strategic commitment to walkable neighbourhoods. Samson is a neighbourhood. It is walkable, but it doesn't have the things to walk to that are necessarily keeping up with the other suburbs. Thank you.
Councillor Mofflin, did you wish to? Yeah.
Thanks. You preempted me actually pressing the button, but thanks. Make sure I do that. Yeah, just very quickly, supportive of the officer's recommendation in the inclusion of the part 4 to that, and maybe just to add to Councillor Sullivan's points, and I kind of think that Samson is most probably more comparable in the sense, rather than to Coolbellup and Willagee, to the likes of Winthrop and Cardinia, in those suburbs that were, you know, the late 70s, early 80s builds. And whilst, you know, Samson did initially have that local retail centre, which, you know, did have a range of offerings within there, market forces or decisions that had been made by the landholders meant that they were no longer supported. And we've certainly seen in that time as well, both I suppose the Coolbellup Centre is actually quite significant, with the Woolworths Shopping Centre as part of that, and the redevelopment of the Cardinia shops occurring at the moment, which will be significant draws through those areas. And I think ensuring that people can access is important, and most probably what we, you know, a suburb like Samson, the challenge as well is that development on the other side, on the northern side of South Street, which in part, whilst it includes, you know, lots of fast food type offerings may in the future also provide more local centre contributions. Picking up on the point in the officer's recommendation as well in regards to density, having spent plenty of time talking to people in Samson, no one has, or rather people have spoken about not wanting to increase density in Samson, and whilst there is absolutely a need for us to ensure that we are contributing to addressing the need for increased density, there will be a bit of work to go to incentivise and encourage that community to move that way as well. So, as Councillor Sullivan said, that's most probably a decade-long type activity for us to undertake.
Councillor Thompson?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. And I support the recommendation. I just wonder, though, whether we might add the term after further, the term long-term, because it's been mentioned by both councillors who've spoken, and that was indeed, I think, the discussion the other night, I think, indicates that you don't want to give people the impression that it's something that we're going to turn around and be doing straight away. So, because it is a long-term thing. So, if Councillor Sullivan is happy, perhaps we include the term further long-term, as it is now. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, thumbs up from Councillor Sullivan. I wondered, the point that was spoken to by Councillor Sullivan that I agree with is it might be a question of does it exist, or it might be a question of is it accessible? And I just wondered if there was something we might want to include in this recommendation to reference that we're talking about access to, a shortfall in access to commercial and retail activities in and around Samson, and whether this might be addressed through future planning framework changes or infrastructure/connectivity upgrades, because I think the point that Cardinia is about to get completely remade, but it's really hard to get to even though it's right there, is a good one, and it's one that we would have to collaborate with neighbouring local governments on. So shortfall in, access to, and then after planning framework changes, planning framework, infrastructure, and maybe /connectivity, just to reference that would be the objective, so that if a normal person's reading it, they would understand that. Does that sit all right with you, Councillor Sullivan? And Councillor Moffat? Yeah, okay. Good-o. Anything further on this one, councillors? Going. All right, so we'll put the amendment to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Back to the item as amended. Anything further? We'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? And that item is unanimous. Let's go to the urban forest and tree canopy one. We have an alternative motion by Councillor Sullivan. We have the officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move one or to other? All right. I'm having a bit of a dilemma here. Councillor Sullivan put his light on and Councillor Archibald spoke first. So that's fine. We'll start with the officer's recommendation. That we can go there. So do we have a seconder for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Graham. All right. Did you want to open on that, Councillor Archibald?
Okay. I have just moved the officer's recommendation because I feel that the officers have assessed the capacity of the staff to deliver the program that they have come up with. To increase that program in the next budget, and we are well down the path of that budget, I believe it's another $180,000 in a budget that is already totally booked out. So if the 180 goes in, something else has to come out. And it is already, as I said, a constrained budget. So I'm also concerned, and I had reiterated this last week, about the number of trees, and they're not inexpensive trees, the ones that we put into the streets. They're quite costly trees that are struggling to get through the summers. And even though we're trying to put more effort into the watering of them. And I know the area around Boombara Park, I know there's a specific reason why some of them may be not doing as well as we'd hoped, but other street trees, as one of the residents said here tonight, have also had their issues as well. So I kind of feel like, while I'd really like to see the number increase as soon as we can, that I don't also want to just increase it and then have the incapacity to deal with the increased number effectively. So in this particular instance, I was happy to support the officer's recommendation, which is based on their assessment of capacity and cost, and then perhaps to look at next year as the year when we might increase both the budget and the number of trees going into the ground. Thanks.
Right, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I'll effectively speak against this motion, and you'll gather that what I've written down is my speech for the alternative motion. I'm not prepared to kick this any further down the track. In 2017, that's a long time ago, even by my standards, we approved the Urban Forest Plan. We're approaching the end of year 8 of a 10-year strategy. Our target was for 10,000 trees, new trees, over the 10 years, and 3,500 replacement trees to deal with the fact that we've got a lot of old trees that are dying and need replacing. So it wasn't just 10,000 trees. The actual target was 10,000 plus 3,500. 1,350 trees a year was the target overall on average. So the program started, and the original years were targeted to be not that high. The original years were targeted to be what we could deal with the existing capacity. It was already built into the system that our capacity was probably only for a smaller number initially, and the program started off with a small number of trees each year, and then by I think it was year 6, it was to jump up to between 1,500 and 1,850 trees per annum. So even though it started off with figures of 500 trees, 750 trees and the like, that sort of figure that's around about the 600 that we've been doing for the last couple of years, it was supposed to jump, and we were supposed to increase our capacity to service that jump by not this year, and not next year, not some couple of years down the track, but by a couple of years ago. Roughly my calculation is that we've only planted about 57% of what we promised to be delivered by the end of year 8. And 40% of those trees are supposed to be the replacement trees. So if we're planting 600 trees a year, 40% of those are not new trees in the sense of increasing the canopy cover. They're just replacing the ones that are dying. So we're really only doing 300 or 400 trees a year. And just to put that into context, I've planted 150 trees personally, similar to the types of trees that this city plants. I planted 150 similar types of trees with similar types of requirement for watering in 1 year at Donnelly River, one person. This council has to be able to do significantly better than that. In November 2023, not that long ago really, it's only a year and a half ago, we decided to put that to temporarily abandon the planting targets. That was around about the time when the target was supposed to jump significantly. And we said, we're not yet ready, we don't yet have the capacity. I totally get that. We all supported the fact that if we don't have the capacity at the time, we can't plant a ridiculous number of trees if we can't support them. So we temporarily abandoned the planting targets. And you will remember the number of people that were in this room complaining about that, and I'm sure Councillor Lang would probably remind us of that. So of those trees that we were supposed to plant that year when we abandoned the targets, we were supposed to plant 1,845 trees. And we said, no, we're just going to plant 600. And then the next year we said, we're going to stay at 600. But what we also said as a council in, when was it? December, no, in fact, November 2023, when we actually decided to reduce down to that 600 figure, a third of our target for that year, we also said that there should be a return to the targets for the planting season of 2026. Not this winter, next year's winter. Now, if we're not going to start getting our capacity in place to achieve that in 2026, then we're going to kick it down the road to 2027 or 2028. And 2028 is when that strategy is already over. And we will have only achieved half of it. I'm a little bit frustrated because I thought that the motions that we passed in 2023 and then subsequently in 2024 were making it pretty clear that this council wanted to get back to that scheduled capacity. It wanted to get back to something that was going to at least start getting back towards target figures. We're never going to make the target that we set, never going to make that, but we do need to start getting back to those sorts of numbers of trees planted each year. And in both resolutions that we passed, we used the words that we needed to increase the capacity of the organisation to plant the trees in the winter of 2026. Well, I put it to you, councillors, that you can't do that. You can't plant trees in 2026 if you haven't already done what the officers have identified, which is we need to increase the organisational capacity. And that includes staff that work out where those trees are going to go, staff that work out what trees are going to go in there, staff that have done all the pre-planning work that gets done probably from January through to the planting season to make sure that those trees can go in. We actually have to pre-order a lot of those sort of trees. So you actually have to start your budget well before when you want to put those trees in the ground. That budget for the extra 300 trees is $180,000 a year, and from what I understand from the report and subsequent comments from officers, is that is the budget needed to buy, to care for, to organise, to administer the planting of those extra trees. Now, you're not going to need all of that in this coming financial year because you're not going to be planting those trees and you're certainly not going to be caring for those trees in this upcoming financial year. So it won't, or it shouldn't be, $180,000 in this year's budget. It's probably a figure that's less than that. Let's say it's $90,000. But what it does is it does something completely different to what this recommendation does. It gets us back on track to the sorts of targets that we promised the community. This resolution doesn't even say that we're going to be planting in the following year. It says we are going to put money in a long-term financial plan that could be changed next budget. You know, we might be in this position again next year, looking at the exact same recommendation, saying we still don't have the capacity to plant more than 600 trees, so that's what we're recommending. Now, I know I said in 2023 and 2024, look, let's give you enough time to sort this out. That's perfectly reasonable. We've given you enough time to sort it out. We now need to do something. And that is why I'm so adamant that we should not support this resolution and we should support the alternative recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for your alternative motion. I just had a question, and a bit of clarification, I guess, on this motion. So to include, it requests that the CEO include appropriate, sorry?
We're on the officer's recommendation.
Oh, apologies.
But if you want to ask a question that helps you determine your view on the officer's recommendation by referencing an alternative, that would be fine.
Apologies, I thought Councillor Sullivan had moved his alternative
No.
motion.
No. Councillor Lang.
Yep. Quoting Councillor Sullivan, I'm going to say 2021 is a long time, even by my standards. I'm surprised you didn't bring it up. A lot of people in this room, we spent multiple council evenings debating the Urban Forest Plan targets, which was prompted by the Fremantle Environmental Collective, who brought a motion forward to this room to say, have you hit any of the targets in the Urban Forest Plan? And the answer was no, we hadn't. Multiple debates we had, and we asked the team, what do you need to hit those targets? And there were calculations done, and there were budget numbers crunched, and it was identified how much money was needed to, one, hit the targets, and two, catch up to the shortfall that we'd achieved to make sure we hit the designated timeline in the Urban Forest Plan. We must have debated that. It was in FPOL, which we don't do anymore, and Council numerous times. I'm reading back through the notes. It was finally adopted in April 2021, if anyone wants to have a look at that during this discussion. I thought we had a council position on this and an agreed budget to hit those targets, which clearly we haven't, which is very disappointing because I know I'm looking at people in this room who voted for that and supported that at the time. So I certainly can't support this officer's recommendation, and I just question what happened to the recommendations from 2021. They've been completely, they're not even mentioned in this report, which is unusual. So I won't support this, and I'll be supporting the alternative.
Thanks, Councillor Lang. Councillor Mofflin.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions, which, of clarification, and one being in reference to the proposed business case for the long-term financial plan, which refers to the expansion that is being proposed through that would then align with the Urban Forest Plan's goal of reaching 20% canopy cover by 2027. Now, if that long-term plan isn't, is the proposal for that to be included as part of this budget? And if not, is that then to be considered as part of a future budget? And would that mean that we would need a mega planting process for us to actually meet that 20% canopy cover? Or is that misleading or maybe a somewhat incorrect statement to suggest that that plan would get us to 20% canopy cover by 2027? And maybe somewhat related to that, is it possible, which I think I'm most probably answering my own question, but is it possible that under the current budget requirements to return to the committed or the decision that was made in regards to returning to 2026 planting levels with the current budget in any shape or form? So I suppose really the first question is the important one for me to get an answer on.
Thanks. So hopefully the Director of Infrastructure will be able to...
If I wasn't clear enough, it says, that business case is asking or is suggesting that it will help us get back to 20% canopy cover by 2027. Seems a bit of a long shot.
I agree. Thank you. Through the chair. So as part of the budget process, the teams put together capacity and they look at the business cases and what they need to do in terms of building that capacity. I agree. I think it is tight, and I don't think we'd hit it by 2027, being brutally honest. The forward plan includes increases and provisions. That doesn't necessarily mean they get adopted. There's a lot of prioritisation that we go through each year, and that's essentially what Councillor Sullivan's referring to, is that if we're not putting that capacity into the teams, the programme is being delayed, and I would suspect it will take us a few years to catch up and to hit the targets that we're talking about.
Great, thank you. I'm also of the same mind as Councillor Sullivan and Lang in regards to the direction that was spoken about and the return to the 2026 or in 2026 planting season to the previous levels. But there's most probably some elements of if this motion doesn't get up, of the proposed alternative, which I'm not fully supportive of, but I'll leave that for a discussion around that.
Thanks, Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, I'll give you my 2 bobs worth, whichever way this goes. I do support the officer's recommendation on this one. I mean, yes, we heard a lot from Councillor Sullivan about what should have been and what could have been and what may have been, but we've got to live in the present and live with what we've got now. The report identifies that capacity is a problem. There's a lot, trees aren't an easy thing to manage, never have been, never will be. And I think if you were to, get a general consensus from the residents of Fremantle that the city was planting 600 trees a year, most people would be flabbergasted and most people would think, wow, that is amazing, and here we are having councillors wanting more and more and more. You can only hit targets if they are realistic. Now, those targets that were put out whenever, I've heard 2017 and I've heard 2021 and 2023, but I don't know what they measured against or who made those targets and whether they were just, rubbery figures plucked out of the air. And if there was some science behind it, I just don't know. But look, you can't achieve all these targets on trees if we don't have the capacity, and we're losing lots of trees just through natural attrition. I think that the city is doing a fantastic job with what they do at the moment, and I think we should just be supporting that. We've done nothing but discuss trees this year. I think every council meeting we've had a free discussion, which wears a bit thin. But, I just think the officers have put a lot of work into this. They know what they're doing. Trees cost money, as I say. Let's just run with what we've got. It's in the long-time financial plan, $180,000. I mean, we're all sitting around this room, we could put $180,000 to a lot of good uses. There's a lot of projects that need 180 grand, and to pluck this one out of the air at this time of the budget process is going to put other projects at risk, and I don't think that's fair either. So I'll stick with the officer's recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Graham. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thank you. Obviously, I wasn't here in 2017, but I do think it's fantastic that we have an urban forest plan. And I also feel like our job as councillors, or to me, my interpretation, is that we should be holding the city and officers to account on the plans that we have committed to, including this, which I don't think that the officer's recommendation really does. I was obviously not here for the debates about targets, and generally I think that they're a piece of marketing more than anything else. I am a bit cynical about targets, but regardless, I think that we should be doing the absolute best that we can to get there if they are set. We might fall 200 trees short, but at least we would have tried our best rather than getting to 2027, 2028 and being like, oh no, we were 1,200 trees short because we just decided that we were going to no longer continue with the strategy that we had. The report identifies that capacity is an issue, but it also identifies an answer, which is just to fund it. And yes, it's coming up maybe late in budget conversations, but to be fair, it was something that was flagged when we had our previous discussions on the urban forest plan, so it's not as if it has come out of nowhere. And I also think that the $180,000 is a clear value for money. I mean, it makes sure that we stick to our word. If we've created a plan, we should be, yes, realistic, but we should also be trying to complete the plans we set. Otherwise, we're kind of doing work and it's not going anywhere. And also, urban canopy is not just providing nice green things for us to look at. It's about cooling spaces. It's about making routes more appealing for active transport, for people to be out in shared spaces, to bring more biodiversity into our community, for habitat. I think that it will create incredible value. It already does in terms of the well-being and our future of the community. And I don't know, throughout this whole conversation, I keep thinking about the engagement we heard throughout the engagement that we got back through the strategic plan, and that consistently people were saying that they wanted us to be courageous or they wanted us to do good things. And the urban forest plan is already there. It's a great thing. We just have to do it. So I will not be supporting the officer's recommendation because of that.
Thanks, Councillor Williamson-Wong. I won't be supporting the officer's recommendation. I actually came in quite undecided on this one, but I've been convinced to support the alt-rec, and I think it is, the capacity thing always worries me, like it really does. But at the same time, if we're going to make a step change, we need to make a step change in a step with the time that we said that we were going to do something. So I'll support the alt-rec. So I'll speak now, but I would suggest to Councillor Sullivan that he would have the numbers now if he wanted to move to the alt-rec after this. A couple of other things just to add in. Things are escalating, like the climate change, impacts are not future things now, they're now things now. And the urban heat island effect and all of the things that we see, it's, you can't plant trees this year and be like, and next year your street will be nice and cool, because that's not how trees work. I just, we need to get ahead of this. We need to, I think going back to 2021, I'm thinking back to what Councillor Lang was saying, and we were still completely on the bandwagon there, and then we got kind of sideswiped by COVID and those budget years, which were pretty horrendous, to be honest. But we've got to get back on track now, and this feels to me like something that is too much of a priority, given the heat that we're going to be living with, to not start these trees sooner rather than later. There's another thing that just came to mind for me, which is the city plan and the work that we've been putting into the city plan, and, reviewing the feedback we got through that process. People are happy with more density. They're happy with people walking more and having more people in the city, but they want it to be green. They want green streets in that. So we'll likely, when that comes to council, commit to those kind of green corridors. But if we don't have the capacity to plant, maintain, deliver those green corridors, then we'll find ourselves in trouble down the track. And that will be high profile, because a lot of these streets are ones where, really development's going ahead, but with that kind of compact in mind, that we will do something in those streets that makes them feel cool and green and livable and all of that. So I think it's step change time. We might just be the step change might be going back to what we said we were going to do, not doing something particularly wild but it is courageous, because it will be an impact on the budget. It will be a staff impact. It will really stretch the staff, but I think it's the right thing to do. So I won't support the officer's recommendation. I will support the alt-rec. Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you. I do have a question on this one. If this is voted, if the officer's recommendation is voted down, and on the basis that Councillor Sullivan's alt-rec will be put up and voted on, can you confirm, so if this is voted down, will our annual tree planting continue while we wait for, so sort of what number 1 there says, and in the alt-rec it says request CEO include appropriate funding, but I'd like to know, will our annual tree planting continue while we're waiting for this alt-rec to be put together and proposed? Just want to make sure it's not holding up any tree planting if we don't approve this, that's all. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Through the chair, we're effectively mid-floor now. We'll carry on at the numbers, at the 600 numbers that we're resourced and have capacity for.
All right. It's your alt-rec, so we don't have to vote. We can move to an alt-rec during debate, because I just want to test out that bit of our standing orders. It's like a little flex. So how do we do that? We'd need... Yeah. We can, in our standing orders, change recommendations partway. Councillor Kamada, did you wish to speak on the officer's
I will make brief comments. I will be supporting the officer's recommendation if we get to that vote, because I do worry that about stretching the capacity that we do have. I think there were reasons why we pulled back on our targets back in November 2023. I wasn't here in April 2021, but I have followed, from that point on, where we're at in this particular, in trying to reach these particular targets. And I do think we do have to have these targets, but I just don't think this is the right time to be making commitments that perhaps are going to stretch our budget and stretch the capacity of our organisation unrealistically. I just think we have to be more practical. However, I'll accept whichever way this goes.
All right, we might continue with this debate. I think we've heard from everyone other than Councillor Thompson. Did you want to speak on the officer's recommendation, Councillor Thompson?
No, only to vote on it, Madam Chair.
All right. So we can go to a vote on this one. All right. So all those in favour of the officer's recommendation, Councillor Archibald, sorry, you wanted to close?
I wanted to close, thank you.
Excellent. You should close. Just
Thank
sneak
you.
in there.
Yes, just by the skin of my teeth or whatever. Sorry. Well, thank you for that very robust discussion, my colleagues. I don't really mind too much which way this goes at all, because having spent a good chunk of the summer carrying a water bottle around Boo Park trying to save a few trees, I'm quite happy that we put some more trees in. But I just felt like we should try and get the system running better than it currently does, because it was distressing to see quite expensive mature trees not surviving through the summers. And this summer and last summer have been the two most brutal summers that I've seen for a very long time. And that was my reason for saying, no, let's get this system working better and then go out and plant trees. I'm totally in support of our urban forest plan. I'm quite sure that I was voting for it at the time in the room. And so I don't see not supporting this, supporting the officer's recommendation as a negation of the urban forest plan. It's a matter of making sure we have a robust system that actually delivers the trees in the future and that they have the capacity to grow. So to be quite honest, I think people should just simply vote whichever way, but we do need to at some point increase the number of trees being planted, but to have a very good system that keeps them growing long term. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Archibald. So I'll put the officer's recommendation that's currently on the screens to the vote. All those in favour? Councillors Archibald, Graham, Kamada, Thompson and Van Dawson. And against? Councillor Sullivan, Williamson Wong, Lang, Fitzharding and Moughlin. I'm going to cast the way I voted. Which is against, and go to Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I'll move my alternative motion.
Seconded by Councillor Lang.
Thank you. I'm sorry this has been divisive. I don't understand why it needs to be. I wrote a comment down, which was going to be my summing up comment from before, that we can't keep telling the community year after year, and that's what we're doing, year after year, that we don't have the capacity to plant more trees, and then we do nothing about actually building that capacity. Because if we had approved the officer's recommendation, that's what we would have done. Not for the first time, not for the second time, not for the third time, but just keeping on kicking it down the road. It's like, oh, I want to have a family, but I don't have a family home, so what do? I do nothing. I don't add a bedroom on. I don't add a couple of bedrooms on so I can have some kids. I just do nothing and then say, well, I don't have the room for the kids, so I won't have any. Because that's kind of like what we've been doing for a number of years, and we need to change that. And I'm glad that we will be in a position to do that. The planting of trees is so critically important. When we did Walyalup Court out here, we made a very conscious decision to plant those jacarandas that you see around the edge there, rather than, because we knew we didn't have the millions of dollars to do the urban upgrade, the concrete, the paving, all of that other stuff. And we said, let's get those trees in now, and look how amazing they look 2 or 3 years later, whatever it is. That is why the trees are so critically important. And what I keep hearing is that we've got to trust the staff. If they're telling us we don't have the capacity, then we can't plant more trees. I do trust the staff. They're telling us we don't have the capacity, and they've told us how to build that capacity. They've actually put it in writing, saying this is what we think we will need to build that capacity. And they have already been building that capacity. And I want to compliment the staff for doing that, because I've been watching the way we've been planting trees for decades now, and I can tell you that we have a much better approach to how we plant trees, how, the soil we put them into, how we prepare the holes, the trees that we buy, the way in which we water them is a lot better, significantly better, and I want to compliment the staff on that. It doesn't mean that trees aren't going to die. It doesn't mean that trees on South Terrace aren't going to get vandalised. Of course they're going to get vandalised, and occasionally, 1 or 2 might die. But the success rate, as was demonstrated in the report, is pretty good. If you're achieving more than 90% success rate, then you're doing a pretty damn good job, and our staff are. And all they need from us is to commit some money to build that capacity so that they can do an even better job that goes some way, not all the way, but some way to achieving the targets in the urban forest plan. It's still going to be significantly short of the targets. Okay, that's fine. We don't have to be sticklers to achieving every single last tree. The 13,050 trees might not all go in, but we'll be much better off if we plant another 300 trees for the last 2 or 3 years of that program. And so I really put it to you, please don't feel like we're ignoring the staff. We're not. We're simply making a budget decision that they've already told us about, that we probably should have made 2 years ago, so we could have increased the tree planting this winter. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
I wonder if the mover of the motion is happy to include the words subject to consideration of other budget priorities in recommendation 1. So it would read, subject to consideration of other budget priorities, request the CEO to include appropriate funding, etc.
No, it already says basically that.
Yeah, I think the CEO is commenting that he feels that that's not necessary.
Thank you. Through the chair, I probably concur with Councillor Sullivan. I think that's what it is doing, asking for consideration through the budget process.
Councillor Williams-Moore?
Thank you. I echo much of Councillor Sullivan's points, but also I think I've grown up doing lots of planting, and my mother always tells me if we only achieve 50%, that's a great result for my mum. So I think the fact that we do have an over 90% success rate is incredibly impressive, actually, and goes to show the care that our staff are taking and making sure that these trees are having the best chance of survival. And also I think in many ways, we are still experiencing, and we've experienced the worst summers, and that really just means that we should be actually rapidly and urgently increasing the capacity, just as Councillor Sullivan is saying, to deliver more trees, because they're becoming more and more important, not just for their looks, or definitely not for their carbon abatement, but more for that urban cooling. And I think also the activation of spaces that people can then use is really important. And I am interested, I guess, a comment towards staff around how we build community and engagement around the trees that we are planting. So we already do a really great job. If we are going to commit to this plan, which I hope we are, then that's a really great thing. And I don't know that all of our community knows about that. So whether there's opportunities for us to be having physical signs around those new plants, or communication through our online platforms, especially through hot summers or periods, it's very open, just as Councillor Archibald has been doing around Boo Park, for our community members to be involved with the planting So I am very supportive of the alt motion and also opportunities to engage our community in the planting or maintenance and care for the trees once we have planted them.
Might just be worth flagging with Councillor Sullivan, that could potentially be a point 4, would be increased community engagement and communication, point 5. Anyway, I'll let you two work it out over there. Councillor Kamada?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Fitzharding. I'll just make a couple of points now that we've moved to the alt-rec. I don't think that your alt-rec is divisive. I do think that we all want the same thing but have different approaches in terms of, how we do this and how we budget. I do think that we need to make sure what goes in thrives. Trees need to be planted in the right places and looked after, and that is essential, whether it's 600 trees or 900 trees. Residents have to buy into this. I think there's plenty of opportunity for residents. I've seen trees up and down various streets of Fremantle that if there's just a little bit more buy-in from residents and, education, and are actually out there watering themselves and supporting what's going on, it would make a big, big difference. And I also think you've got to have the right trees in the right place. And sometimes with less, you can have more. If you pick the right trees that create good canopy, I think that's very, very important. For example, an olive tree as compared to various other varieties in the right place will give you far greater capacity and, canopy, and also probably better results in terms of wildlife being able to enjoy those particular varieties. So there's some points I just wanted to make, and thank you very much, Councillor Sullivan, for your alt-rec. I think it's created some really interesting conversation, and as I said, I think we all want to land in the same place at the end of it all.
Thank you, Councillor Kamada. Councillor Mofflin?
Thank you. I just want to echo Councillor Sullivan's comments in regards to the comment that was made around us stretching ourselves. I don't believe it's stretching, it's merely prioritising where we want to put our efforts. And I know the manager of Parks has spoken to us over the last couple of years particularly, and spoken about that capacity that has been built and the plan to build ongoing capacity. And this, within the report itself, it does talk to what is required to enable us to get things up to that higher planting level. So very happy to be able to support that. I am and would make a request to the Mayor, and when this is moved for voting around 1B and C, I'm more than comfortable with 1A, but I think the high impact urban tree element, as had previously been described by staff as being part of their previous 600 consideration, is the right way to go, and I would like to be able to vote in that favour, in that manner, and also in regards to the Verge Garden scheme too.
I'm not quite sure what you're asking me to do there, because the officer's recommendation
Just
was lost.
So I just don't want to support B and C in that
Okay.
alternative. So the officers had spoken in their recommendation.
So
that
1B and C or 2B and C?
1B and C.
Okay. So you just want me to call
Move them separately.
1A and then 1B and C?
Yes, please.
Sure. Okay.
Yep,
That
thank you.
makes sense. Thank you. Councillor Lang.
Thank you. On the 90%, which has been brought up a few times, it's actually really exceptional. I think the global standard or Australian standard might be 30% survival rate. So that's really exceptional. Our team can deliver a 90% survival rate. We keep talking about this being an impact or a burden or something like this on our operations. And I really see this as a long-term investment that this council is making in Fremantle. We will get to a point where the volumes of tree planting we're describing may not be required, as we imagine some of these trees we're putting in do become mature. And what a city that will be at that time when we don't need to plant so many new trees and we're just focused on strategic infilling rather than playing catch up in our streetscape at the moment. Just want to touch on the targets that are being discussed here as well. The 20% is being thrown around, and just as a note, we don't even know if we are at 20% or 10% or 15% at the moment. We haven't measured the canopy since 2017. So it's really difficult for us to say what we need to do to achieve that 20%. I'm just flagging that as something we should be considering. And again, the 900 that we're discussing in here, I'm not too worried about that figure. What I really wanted to bring up, though, was the targets that we've got at the moment in our urban forest plan that we keep referring back to in this document and on our website. We are not going to hit the targets. I've been keeping some of my own notes on that. That ends in 2027, the targets that we've set for the city. We are not going to hit those targets. In 2021, we identified that, I don't know the reason for this, but we identified that some tube stock that we were planting in natural areas, whether it was on a community planting day or something, was being counted towards the targets in our urban forest plan, which is not in the spirit of the urban forest plan. If we were just merely using tube stock, we could hit those targets each year for about $5,000. Because tube stocks, as we know, are only a few dollars each. It's clear by the quantum of the budget we're speaking. We're talking about putting in semi-mature street trees, as we identify. We see on a verge with 2 stakes that we water. And we identified in 2021 that we were perhaps using or counting the wrong trees going in. And we did a reset, and we agreed that we would want to see a minimum of 80% of each year's total being a street tree, as we agreed on the definition, and 20% being tube stock. And I'm just raising that now because I've gone on our website to look at the latest data we're reporting, and again, we've gone back to including natural areas and tube stock towards our total. And we're making comments such as urban forest targets exceeded, and they haven't been. I don't think that's the intent or the spirit of the urban forest plan. I'm just raising that because I wanted to add an extra point in here, if Councillor Sullivan would let me, specifically around the targets. I just want to quickly bring that up. I have sent it through to Mel, if you're able to put it on the screen, just so we could share that. They're bullet points. It's point 6 and they're bullet points. There is no way in the world we're going to hit the urban forest plan targets. And I would like to make a request that updated figures are brought back to council. We define the shortfall in the target, but importantly, we update delivery on the urban forest plan targets. It's either we have the urban forest plan or we don't, and there is no way that we're going to hit the 2027 target. So however long it's going to take, if we're pushing out to 2030 or whatever it might be, let's actually accept that and stop publishing something that we're never going to achieve. So I'd like to ask that we work.
Councillor Sullivan, are you, it's not on the screen yet, but in sort of general terms, are you?
Yeah, look, I'm happy for both Councillor Williams and Wong's suggested minor amendment, and also for Councillor Lang's. I would also point out, I guess if I may, that when I drafted this motion and it was sent through officers to polish, they changed part 1 significantly, and it goes to a point that was raised. And so we can just pop up to part 1 if we can, because my original recommendation basically was asking that 1A be done for this budget, but 1B and 1C were for the long-term financial plan. Now it was merged into one item, and of course it now looks like that's all for this year's budget, when in fact B and C were always intended to be for consideration in the long-term financial plan. So if we could simply add the words into B and C as part of long-term financial plan for each of those, that would be actually what I was indicating in my very first email. So I know others have spoken to that, and I didn't want it to be sounding like I was trying to achieve everything in 1 year, because that probably would have been unrealistic.
All right. Officers, just checking we're comfortable with that. Yep. Okay. So as part of the long-term... No, hang on. Not that one. So annual budget. Yeah. And if you could just put the before the long-term financial plan in points 2 and 3.
Perhaps if you just say draft annual budget, it might pick up Councillor Thompson's great concern.
Okay. All right. So we fixed point 1. If we can pop down again now to 6.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to add. And yet the reason being is there's no way we're going to hit any of the targets. So yeah, let's accept that and tell us when we can hit those targets and come back with the suggested updated timeline, which may be 2028, 29, 30, whatever it might be. But we should stop referring to those dates and targets.
Can I just ask a question as to whether that time frame is realistic for officers to come back to figures by June 30, with figures by June 30? This is why we used to have committees, guys. All right. So I guess on the side, the Director of Infrastructure says that is quite soon, I think, is the vibe I'm getting.
2 more months. It's not going to make any difference.
Yep, so instead of 30 June, 30 August? Yep. Okay, getting there. All right. Following. All right. So this has been accepted by the mover and the seconder, I think, so we don't need to move it as an amendment, do we? You can always vote on things separately if people want that. Okay, are we happy enough with what's on the screen? Yep. Does anyone further want to speak now on this one? Councillor Archibald, did you have a
I just wanted to ask the question. The urban forest plan, is this suggesting that it only is based on the street trees and not on the planting that goes on in the park areas? Could that be clarified? Thanks.
Yeah, this was much debate in 2021, and we then, of the targets, we'd broken the total into 2 columns, one being street trees and one being natural areas. That's the 80-20.
I mean, this is reasonably well articulated, I think, in the urban forest plan, following all of that extensive debate back then. Councillor Archibald, did you want to follow on?
I was just going to make a comment on, because, I mean, I will go back and have a good look at what that does say, but I just want, for the benefit of community, if any community are listening, the enormous effort that goes into tube stock planting is having a huge upside in the parkland areas in particular. And I have always been so impressed with what the Friends of groups do. There's Clontarf Hill, Cantonment Hill, Boo Park, areas down in South Fremantle and the walkway at the back near the tip site. I mean, those areas over the last 20 years have been absolutely transformed by community people going down there, and where there was once bare dirt, there is now substantial bushland. And I just wanted to make that comment because it really has been a remarkable turnaround for many of the areas around Fremantle, and all credit to many, many community members for doing that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moughlin.
I've spoken, but I've got a question for staff, if that's okay. In regards to 6 and the point around providing a suggested updated timeline for delivery of the targets, would it be that, considering that the plan end date is 2027, was it the intention to develop a new plan subsequent to that plan? And would there be consideration of new targets as part of developing a new plan?
Reasonable question.
Good question. I'll be honest, I've not given a new plan any thought. We always anticipated we'd be recalibrating the existing plan to try and address the targets.
All right. We have a recommendation on the screen. Councillor Sullivan, if you'd like to close.
I will just quickly. I just do want to point out that when I wrote my original recommendation, the staff asked to run it through and did make some changes. And so I was very confident that part 1 was not saying it's locked into the budget. It is actually subject to budget, as everything else always is. And the staff wrote that aspect of it. So I'm confident that that's belts and braces now. And I also, I think originally talked about in my motion putting in the words $180,000 for this coming budget, but the reality is I don't know what the cost will be. What I do know is it's probably going to be less than $180,000 because that $180,000 was for planting and care as well as administration and preparation. So the majority of what will happen in this financial year would be administration and preparation that will require an additional staff member at some stage. And the last thing I wanted to point out is if for some reason that the 14 months before the trees go in isn't enough time for the organisation to get it sorted out, they'll come back to us and tell us that just prior to winter next year. All right? Now, if we're confronted by that, we'll be reasonable. But imagine if we'd got down the path and we found out that it was going to take 18 months or 20 months to build capacity, and that we were only making that decision maybe next year or the year after. We would be so far behind. We would have been halfway through writing our new strategy before we even got more than 600 trees in the ground per year. And just in relation to 6, I think the recommendation that will come back from staff in August or whenever would be very much along the lines that, look, the urban forest plan, the general strategy of it is right. We probably need a new one from 2028 to 2038. We probably need new targets. Given that we're not going to meet the current ones, we might as well probably start the new plan sooner rather than later and build the confidence back into the community that council is serious about creating an urban forest in the city of Fremantle. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. We have the alternative recommendation on the screen. I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? Councillors Thompson, Van Dawson, Sullivan, Williamson, Wong, Lang, myself, Kamada, Moughlin and Archibald, and against Councillor Graham, and that's carried. All right. Let us go to the active reserve hire policy next. I will just flag that the remainder of the items, unless you tell me otherwise, I would be inclined to move en bloc. I won't do that yet. I'll do that after the active reserve hire policy. So have a think about if there's any that you wish to speak on. Do we have a mover for the active reserve hire policy item? Councillor Moughlin, seconded by Councillor Graham. On this item then. Anyone wish to speak on the item? Councillor Moughlin?
The only thing I'll say, a couple of things very quickly. Thanks to the work staff have done. I think it's good that we're looking for a modern system to enable the booking. Having spoken to clubs over the years, they've found the previous system, whilst well-intentioned, difficult at times to use. So it'd be great to have that transparency and the ability for clubs to do so. And I really look forward to hearing the feedback from our community on the policy and ensuring that when it does come back to us, that it does take into consideration that feedback too.
Thanks, Councillor Mofflin. Anyone else? Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Mofflin. I second those comments and thank the officers for their work on this. Very keen to hear back from the community just to see their feedback and incorporate that into the final version. I just wondered with the fees and charges, I do appreciate the way they were calculated and looks to minimise any additional impact than what clubs are currently paying and what have you. But I just wondered, is that part of the consultation, or are they just would clubs just be commenting on the policy? Can they sort of comment on what's in the agenda as well, like how it's been put? Yeah, just mainly the fees, I guess, the structure that's proposed now.
Go to the director on that one.
Thank you. Through the chair, we will be asking the community to comment on the policy, but under the FAQs listed in the survey, in the consultation process, will be a list of the fees. So they'll be clear what they'll be charged, because we know that that will be the first question that everybody asks.
Thank you. All right. Well, this one's out for consultation, so it will come back to us. So I'll put it to a vote if everyone's comfortable. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Excellent. The remaining items, did anyone wish to pull any of those to speak on? If not, I'll ask Councillor Kamada.
Just 30, what is it, the information report on the library, biannual report.
All right, do you want to move that one then?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that.
Yeah, and I'll get a second of that. Councillor Archibald. Councillor Kamada.
Yeah, look, very, very briefly, I just think it's a really, it's a very positive report. I think it shows what a wonderful job our library services provide, and just over such a wide array of functions that the community enjoys from this particular operation. There's also, I thought that it was interesting to see that the allocation to the City of Fremantle and is based on a combined population with town of East Fremantle. And with that combined population, we're able to receive benefits for ratepayers for both cities. And I just think that sort of cooperation shows, or alignment, what can be achieved when you look broader across the different local governments. So yeah, and there were just so many. I could point out so many different examples of how fantastic this service is, and I just wanted to highlight that. That I think we're really fortunate to have such a fantastic library in our city. Just looking at the history collection alone, and the way this is growing, and its types of talks that we're privileged to enjoy. I just think that needed to be highlighted. So, yeah, well done.
Thank you, Councillor Kamada. All right, should we put that one to a vote? All those in favour? And that's unanimous. And for the remaining 4 items, I have a mover, Councillor Thompson, seconder, Councillor Sullivan. All those in favour? And that's passed on block. Thank you. So there's no committee reports. We don't have committees. No motions of which previous notice has been given. Urgent business, late items or confidential business. So I'll declare the meeting closed at 7:25. Thank you.